Welcome to 25 Days of Cardboard on Cardboard Odysseys. I'm Matt, your guide on this festive journey through the world of cardboard games. Each day leading up to Christmas, we'll unwrap a new adventure in collectible card games, board games, and all things gaming related. So grab your gaming beverage, settle into your gaming chair, and let's dive into the joy of cardboard. Welcome to 25 Days of Cardboard, where every day is a game day and every game is a holiday treat. Thanks for watching. And today on 25 Days of Cardboard, I've got a deck tech for you, Sauron, Lord of the Rings. This is going to be a Reanimator style deck with a budget right at about $500. And this might be my league deck for next month. It's the Precon League, basically. You pick any Precon and then you can use any legendary from them. I think I'm going to go with this one. This one seems the most fun. Reanimator style Sauron. Reason why I picked Sauron is because while it is expensive at 8 mana, it has a cast trigger instead of when it enters the battlefield. So if it gets countered, it still happens, which is great. For those of you that don't know who it is, Sauron, Lord of the Rings, is 5 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red. Legendary Avatar Horror, from Lord of the Rings, of course. And when you cast a spell, amass Orcs 5, mill 5 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a 9/9, has trample, and then it has whenever a commander and opponent control dies, the ring tempts you. You'll really never care too much about the ring tempting you, although there are some benefits for it. It's just not that big of it's just not what the deck's centered around. It's just mainly around the cast trigger of reanimating something. 8 mana is a lot, but the deck should be fine doing that. So first we'll go into the creatures. Anger is a pretty standard staple in most red Reanimator decks because as long as it remains in your graveyard and you control a mountain, creatures you control have haste. It's just a haste enabler. A lot of the cards that you have that have like enter the battlefield triggers or attack triggers, you want to be able to get those, mainly the attack triggers, you want to be able to get those as much as possible. And being able to have haste while in your graveyard, as long as I don't have graveyard hate, you're doing everything the deck wants to do. Hasty big creatures that, and this just enables that, of course. You'll never cast it. You want to discard this to any of your discard outlets. You want this in the graveyard, and you want to have a mountain. Archon of Cruelty, one of the best haymakers in the deck. The fact that it's not legendary actually leans it to be the strongest, I think, in the deck because of all it does. It's just tons of value for what it does. So it's 6 colorless, double black, and it's a 6/6 flyer. None of that really matters. The attack trigger is what really matters, and the enter the battlefield is what matters. So when Archon of Cruelty enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, discard a card, and loses 3 life. You draw a card, and you gain 3 life. So for instance, if you had Anger, you'd be able to get both of the enter the battlefield and attack triggers of this card, which is just tons of value. And like I said, being able to make copies of this with some of the cards in the deck adds the kind of makes this the biggest haymaker in the deck. It's the one that I like the most, at least. You've got Bladewing, Deathless Tyrant. This is kind of like a Grave Titan. It's very interesting. So Bladewing, Deathless Tyrant is 5 colorless, 1 black, 1 red. Flying, haste 6/6. Legendary creature, Dragon Skeleton. Whenever it attacks, whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, for each creature card in your graveyard, create a 2/2 black zombie knight creature token with menace. Note that they don't come into play tapped, like Grave Titan, I believe, does. And also, most notably, the number that you get is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. The deck runs about 20 creatures, so you're going to have a decent amount and a decent chance with all the discarding to at least get 2 at the bare minimum, which is still pretty good value every time it deals combat damage, so pretty solid there. You've got Cavern Horde Dragon. This actually is just a really good card even outside of the Reanimator decks because of the effects that it has. It is 9 mana, which is quite a lot for a 6/6 flying trample haster. However, it has this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest number of artifacts an opponent controls. So if they have a bunch of clues or a bunch of treasures, this becomes a very, very cheap dragon. And it also has, whenever Cavern Horde Dragon deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token for each artifact that player controls. So not only does their artifacts make your guy cheaper, it also reaps the benefits of getting a ton of treasure tokens. Pretty awesome. If you can reanimate this for cheap, or even just cast it for cheap, Flying Trample Haste, you're almost certainly going to pay for itself and also gain some extra treasure. Atali Primal Storm. A lot of people will know this card. It's just a solid attack trigger card. So 4 colorless, 2 red, legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur. It's a 6/6. Whenever it attacks, you exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. Tons of value, great reanimation target, get you lots of value and get you ahead of the game and win. Oh, I forgot to mention, one of the reasons why this deck is going to be fairly strong in the league, I think, is going to be because there's no combos in the pre-con months. So combos are banned, so good value like this is really where it's at. And this kind of deck, while there are some salty cards in it, it's still not extremely powerful. Like, it's not like CDH level or anything like that. It'll be very strong, very mid-rangey. Should have tons of good times. Maybe not necessarily for your opponents, depending on what you reanimate, though. There is Toxrill. So Felden of the Third Path, 1 colorless and double red. It's a 2/3 legendary creature, Human Artificer. And for 2 colorless and a red, you can tap it, create a token that's a copy of target creature in your graveyard, except that it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste. Sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. Most notably, it doesn't exile the thing in your graveyard, so you can do this every single turn to whatever's in your graveyard. It's pretty great. It doesn't really matter that it's an artifact. Who cares if you sacrifice it? There are die triggers in the deck a little bit. You'll gain a little bit of value from that. There's also some things that want you to sacrifice creatures, so you can sacrifice the creature instead on your second main phase after you attack, and gain some value there as well. So Felden is a great reanimator target. A great reanimator enabler, sorry. Ghostly Pilfer, a very good value engine card. 1 colorless, 1 blue. It's a 2/1 creature spirit rogue. Whenever Ghostly Pilfer becomes untapped, you may pay 2 colorless. If you do, draw a card. This isn't that... I wouldn't really focus on this part here. This could show up if you're flooded and you don't really have anything to do with your mana. Cool, do that. The main things what we want is these 2 lines here. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. That means anything from Exile, anything from Command Zone. So anytime they cast a commander, and this is only 2 mana, so getting this out cheap, or getting this out quick is really good ways to get card value. And it's free drawing, basically. You know, it's great. Also, what has on it, another very, very important thing, it has discard a card. Ghostly Pilfer can't be blocked this turn. So sure, 2 damage is fine. Getting in there for 2 damage unblockable is great. But the biggest thing that it has is it's a discard outlet. So you're not going to have to worry about paying to discard your cards if you want to discard a reanimator spell, or discard a reanimator card to reanimate with your reanimator spell. This is just free discard. The benefits get unblocking, and then you can get a little bit of card draw if you pay the mana. But again, only do that if you have the mana. I wouldn't waste too much mana on it. Glenelodge Archmage, this is one of the protection packages creatures. It's 3 colorless, 1 blue. It's a creature fairy wizard, flying 2/2. It has pay 1 blue, sacrifice Glenelodge Archmage, and counter target non-creature spell. It also has persist. When this creature dies, if it had no -1/-1 counter on it, return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. So it protects your board, protects your reanimation spells, protects you, and does that twice as long as you have 2 blue open. And then also, you can reanimate this if you really need to protect your board and just make sure you have like a piece of protection at all times. You can try to reanimate this and keep this on the board. Very good, solid piece. Creatures that have extra effects that you want to reanimate is pretty good. Another one of those is Hostage Taker. 2 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black. It's a 2/3. When Hostage Taker enters the battlefield, exile another target creature or artifact until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. Most notably, this is an exile on a creature, which is great. It hits the One Ring, which is normally indestructible, but this exiles it, which is great. So you can either, 1, exile your One Ring, because of course we're playing the One Ring. If you get too many counters on it, you can exile it and then recast it. Fantastic. Or you can do that to your opponent. You can exile their One Ring, and then you can cast it for yourself, which is just great. Just note that whenever Hostage Taker leaves, if you haven't cast it yet, they get it back. They don't get the cast trigger, but they still will get to be able to use it, of course. Yeah, very strong creature. Being able to reanimate this, sacrifice it, reanimate it. Once you've cast the spell from it, gain value from yourself. Very versatile. Good card. Jin-Kataxis Core Augur, 8 colorless, 2 blue. It has Flash. It's a 5/4, and at the beginning of your end step, draw 7 cards. Each opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. Most of the time you'll cast this on your turn. You'll probably never cast it for Flash. You'll probably just reanimate it. There are some instant flash reanimation spells, but they're fairly limited, and they make you sacrifice the creature. The one that I'm thinking of, they make you sacrifice the creature, so you're not really going to benefit from the card very much. But basically, you'll draw 7 cards, discard down to 7, and then if your opponents can't deal with it, then they, have to discard their entire hand. They have no maximum hand size. And one of the great things about that is that even if they do get rid of it, it's not that big of a deal. You've most likely already drawn 7, and you've gotten rid of a kill spell, and you'll probably draw another reanimation spell and either reanimate that or reanimate something better. So, not too bad. Very good value card here. If they don't answer this, their hand becomes nothing, and they just, they'll have no value. You've got, did that double click? Nope, okay. Likeness Looter, very good new card, I believe. I haven't seen, Wilds of Eldraine. So 1 blue, 1 black, flying 1/1. You can tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. So this is what's called a looting card. It even has looter in the name, of course. But yeah, drawing a card and ditching a card is known as looting. And basically that's the whole purpose of the deck, is drawing cards and then ditching cards, because you want to ditch the creatures and then draw the reanimation spells or the protection spells or the removal. And then this creature also has, you can pay X. Likeness Looter becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with mana value X, except that it has flying and this ability. Activate only as a sorcery. Activate only as a sorcery does kind of suck. It's you only can do this on your turn, basically, and other than that, it's still a very strong ability, and it has a loot ability on it as well, so very strong card. Getting the attack triggers from, you have to pay quite a bit of mana, but to copy some of the stuff like Archon of Cruelty, get the attack trigger, pretty good value if you got nothing else better to do. Otherwise, just a good card. You've got Lord Xander the Collector. This guy is very mean. It's probably one of the saltiest cards in the deck because of it does so many different things that people don't like. So 4 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red. It's a 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent discards half the cards in their hand, rounded down. Whenever it attacks, defending player mills half their library, rounded down. And then when it dies, target opponent sacrifices half the non-land permanents they control, rounded down. Obviously, that has a bunch of crazy text on it. Being able to attack with this is pretty great. Being able to sacrifice this as fodder for one of your spells is fantastic as well. Yeah, just a very strong, oppressive card. It does a lot of things that are, strong. So, good card. You've got Desert Hall Primal Tide, 5 colorless, 2 blue, and 7/7. This spell can't be countered. That's pretty good, but most of the time you're going to be reanimating it, so that doesn't quite matter. You have no maximum hand size. That's pretty great. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card. That's pretty great. If it didn't have this last thing, I would not run it, however. Discard 3 cards. Exile Nezahal Primal Tide. Return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. All the other effects are fine, like, drawing a card anytime they play a non-creature spell is great and all, but if it didn't have the free discard outlet on it, I actually wouldn't run it in this deck. But because it has all of that encompassed into one card, it makes the cut, and it is a very strong, good value creature. It ain't gonna win the game with attacking, because it's just a 7/7 with no evasion, but the amount of value you get from it, having a free discard outlet that has also protection for the creature itself, pretty good. You've got Obsessive Stitcher. 1 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black. It's got a loot ability, draw a card, then discard a card, but it also has the reanimate ability on it as well. 2 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black. Sacrifice Obsessive Stitcher, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Most notably, this can be done any time, not as a sorcery. I like that a lot. I really don't like not as a sorcery. I understand it sometimes, but man, the buzzkill, Overcharged Amalgam, 2 colorless, 2 blue, 3/3, flash, flying, exploit, and when it exploits a creature, counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. This is just one of the protection creatures in the deck. Exploit, like I said, there are a couple benefits you'll get from exploiting creatures, and having a creature that has the ability to, basically stifle as well as a counter spell is pretty great. Phantasmal Image, you have a couple non-legendary creatures or cards with value that you'd like to copy. Most notably, you can copy other people's stuff as well. But for 1 blue, 1 colorless, you may have Phantasmal Image enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature in the battlefield, except that it's an illusion in addition to its other types, and it has, when this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it. Pretty simple there. You'll most likely have no problem keeping this around. Any target that's going most things that target is going to be a kill spell anyways. Sometimes they'll have like the thing that just targets for whatever and it'll kill it, but Trust me, for 2 mana, it's worth the risk. Alright, you've got Scourge of the Throne. 4 colorless, 2 red, flying, 5/5 with the Throne. Dethrone is whenever this creature attacks the player with the most life or tied with the most life, you get a 1/1 counter on it. And then it also has, whenever Scourge of the Throne attacks for the first time each turn, if it's attacking the player with the most life or tied for the most life, untap all attacking creatures. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Obviously, there's a couple attack triggers that we would really like to double up on and be able to get more of them. Not to mention that this is a flying, dethrone, so it can get larger with the 1/1 counters on it. It's a good flying creature that does the damage and gives you extra combat steps, so it's pretty great. You've got Shouldered Whispering one of the staples in Reanimator decks because it just does everything you want it to do. For 5 colorless and 2 black, it has Swamp Walk. That's pretty decent, not too relevant, but pretty decent. It's a 6/6, so a decent body. And at the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it reanimates something on every upkeep. Fantastic. It also has, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. Honestly, if it just had this one ability, I'd still run it. Having this ability on it as well, that's just icing on the cake. I like it. Next card here is Spark Double, one of my favorite clones in the game because it has a special feature on it. So for 3 colorless and 1 blue, you may have Spark Double enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature or planeswalker. I like that it can copy planeswalkers. It's in a few of my decks because of that. It is only cards you control, but it enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter or an additional loyalty counter, and it isn't legendary. Pretty cool. I like that. I like that you can copy any of the baller legendaries in the deck and just have 2 of them, because why not? You've got Toxel the Corrosive, one of the most saltiest cards that I think my friends have ever had me play against them. I really like Toxel. I think it's a very solid creature, but they hate it. One of the things that it has these things called slime counters. They are not -1 counters. They are tracked completely separately, but I'll read the card and then I'll explain why. 5 colorless, 2 black. It's a 7/7 legendary slug horror. At the beginning of each end step, you put each end step, by the way, every end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Doesn't affect you. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. Yeah, pretty good. And then it also has, there's more, of course. Whenever a creature you don't control with the slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token. Pretty good. There's more. You can pay a blue and a black, sacrifice a slug, draw a card. So this has removal, creature generation, and card draw value. It's got everything. It's a great reanimation target. Yeah, if this lands and this goes 1 full rotation around the table, it's pretty much over for them. Blasphemous Act, one of the board wipes in the deck. It's a pretty standard board wipe. For 9 mana, you do 13 damage, but it costs 1 less to cast for every creature on the battlefield. You've got Breach the Multiverse, 5 colorless, 2 black as a sorcery. It's very expensive as a sorcery, so you can't reanimate it, but you'll have to pay full value for it. But it is insane because each player mills 10 cards. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker card in that player's graveyard. Put those onto the battlefield under your control. Then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. It's pretty great, reanimating 4 things at once for 7 mana. Pretty good value there. It's a good endgame finisher. You could probably ramp up to it if you like, I don't know, Dark Ritualed on like maybe turns 2, 3, or 4. You got like a really nutty hand with like a Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, 2 lands. The hand would be pretty nutty, but you could do that if you find some way to get there and cast it really early on. You can run away with the game because you're milling the cards. You're going to get something from everybody. It's very rare that you won't get something from everybody, so good value. You got Buried Alive, 2 colorless, 1 black. You've got Buried Alive, 2 colorless, 1 black. As a sorcery, search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them into your graveyard, then shuffle. You want to be able to fill your graveyard with things, and this is a nice 3-for-1. You just go get your 3 best big bad creatures and put it in the graveyard. This is a little risky because if you do go put your best things in the graveyard and somebody exiles your graveyard, then you're sad, and your 3 best things are no longer in the game anymore. But not many people run graveyard hate, so take advantage of that. You have Demonic Tutor. Search your library for a card, put it in your hand for 2 mana. 1 black, 1 colorless. Sorcery speed. Pretty standard there. You've got Dread Return. 2 colorless, 2 black. Sorcery, return target card from your creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then it has flashback, sacrifice 3 creatures, and you can cast from your graveyard for its flashback cost, then exile it. So like I was talking before, a little bit of value from sacrificing some creatures, and those temporary creatures you get from Felden, of course, would be a great source for this card. Even your commander as well. Your commander getting the reanimation spell and the Amass Orcs and the Mill 5 is also pretty good. You've got Faithless Looting, one of the best draw ditch cards in the game because it has draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards for just 1 red mana. And then flashback 2 colorless, 1 red. You can pay and you do it again. Draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. You want to draw your reanimation spells and ditch your big bomb creatures. Feed the Swarm, 1 colorless, 1 black sorcery. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. The colors that we're playing, Grixis, does not have very many ways of getting rid of enchantments. So this is just a very cheap way of doing that. It sucks that it's a sorcery speed, but it is what it is. Reanimate. The best reanimate spell in the game. For just 1 singular black, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to its mana value. That's fine. It's worth taking the 7. Especially if you get like an Archon of Cruelty, you'll take 8, but then you'll gain 3, and then he'll attack, and then you'll gain 3, and then you're drawing 2 cards, and they lose 2 creatures, and they're losing 2 cards. The amount of value you gain from reanimating these big bomb creatures, is worth it. And of course, it's any graveyard, a graveyard. So, pretty good. Victimize. 2 colorless, 1 black. Sorcery speed. Choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield. So you're sacrificing one of your creatures. Again, those Felden tokens are looking really appealing. Or those slugs, whatever. Or those zombies that you created, of course. Those zombie tokens. Sacrifice 1 creature and you get 2 big bombs back. Pretty good. Wheel of Misfortune. I'm going to save you a lot of trouble of trying to remember how this works and just... Everybody picks a number. Whoever picks the lowest doesn't do anything. Everybody in between, they wheel. And then the top person takes damage equal to the number they chose. That's how this card works. Very simple. It's 2 colorless and 1 red. But yeah, each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards, depending on what you chose. But the lowest one does nothing. The people in the middle, they all wheel. And I think if you're tied, you also still do nothing. Like if 2 players 2-0, they do nothing. I'm fairly certain of that. But yeah, the reason why I play this is because it's only 3 mana, and normal wheels, when you're not playing cards that prevent your opponents from drawing a bunch of cards, normal wheels you have to gain more value than your opponents drawing 21 cards total. You're drawing 7, but they're all drawing 7 as well, so they're drawing a total of 21 cards. But with Wheel of Misfortune, some people won't want to wheel. Maybe they have a really good hand and they don't want to wheel. So they won't draw a new hand of 7. It's pretty good. So it's less total value. So it's kind of like Windfall, but like, I think it's slightly better in some scenarios. So that's why I picked it. An Offer You Can't Refuse, one of the best counter spells in the game, in my opinion. 1 blue, instant speed, counter target non-creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. It's just really, really good. The treasure tokens are not. It's like a consolation prize, of course. It's just amazing. 1 blue is great. One mana counter spells are great. Arcane Denial for 1 blue and 1 colorless, instant speed, counter target spell, any spell, which is great. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and you draw a card at the beginning of of the next upkeep as well. This card's a little, it's tempting to not play. You could play Counterspell instead. It's double blue, which is the reason why I'm not playing Counterspell. But there's enough dual lands in the deck where you're probably fine getting double blue. You shouldn't have no issues. And there's fetch lands as well, and tri-land, of course. So you probably could run Counterspell instead of this. The 2 draw is pretty relevant, but I'd like that it counters any spell for just 1 blue and a colorless. It's just a little bit flexible, and you still get to draw a card as well. So I don't know. This is risky. It's one of the riskiest cards in the deck, which is very strange to say. Run Counterspell if you don't like Arcane Denial. You've got Big Score, and then there's another one called Unexpected Windfall. They both do the exact same thing, and they're both instant speed, 3 colors and 1 red. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card. Then you draw 2 cards and create 2 treasure tokens. So it's great card draw, it's great ramp. You create 2 treasure tokens, which is fantastic. It's instant speed, so you can wait to do it until the about the end of your opponent's turn, just before your turn. So you can discard that bomb and then reanimate it on your turn. Very good. You want to be able to discard things at instant speed so they have less information. You don't want them to know you have the big bomb in your hand that you're going to discard and then reanimate on your turn. You want them to think that you've got nothing in the graveyard. There's nothing in there, of course. That's why Buried Alive is a little risky, but Entomb is great. So if you're worried about Buried Alive, I would honestly just scrap it and get rid of it. Just add another draw ditch effect of some sort, some kind of looter, whatever. Speaking of Entomb, for 1 black instant speed, search your library for a card, put that card onto your into your graveyard, then shuffle. It's instant speed, which is great. A lot of surprise. You can do it at the end of somebody's turn, as it goes to your turn, before it goes to your turn, so you don't waste the mana entombing. It's already in the graveyard, ready for you to reanimate, and it catches them also by surprise, hopefully. You got Forbidden Alchemy, 2 colorless, 1 blue, instant speed. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. And then it also has flashback. So not only does this give you value by being able to draw cards and then also discard cards, or rather kind of mill cards, it has flashback. So if you really need to, you can discard this card to something that you have as a draw ditch, and then gain the value later on when you're paying 7 mana to flash this back. Frantic Search, for 2 colorless and 1 blue, instant speed, draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards, untap up to 3 lands. This is just a free draw ditch, which is fantastic. There are ways to gain extra mana by playing those bounce lands that come into play tapped and you have to bounce a land. I don't like them. They tap for 2, so if you had 2 of those or even 1 of those on the field, as long as you have 2 other lands, you'll net 1 mana, so it's kind of ramping. It's a little wonky, but I don't like those lands. I don't ever run those bounce lands unless there's super good synergy with landfall and whatnot. But in normal decks, I just do not like them, so I don't run them. But yeah, Frantic Search, just draw ditch. Good enough without the bounce lands. If you like the bounce lands, run them. Infernal Grasp, instant speed, 1 colorless, 1 black, destroy target creature, and you lose 2 life. This is very generic. There is Go for the Throat, which is destroy target non-artifact creature, but and you don't lose the life. But realistically, I'd rather just have the flexibility. They're both instant speed, but if you want to run Go for the Throat, if you don't care about the artifacts, run Go for the Throat. You won't lose the life. Otherwise, this is just way more flexible. Hits any creature, and that's what we want. Is a Charm, for 1 blue, 1 red, instant speed, choose 1. Count a target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. Is a Charm deals 2 damage to target creature. Draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. So the standard, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. So that's it's got loot, it's got somewhat targeted removal and somewhat protection. 2 damage to some creatures like a Orcish Bowmaster is pretty good. Counter target non-creature spell unless they pay 2. If they're trying to tap out for something big, nope. Pretty good. Very flexible, I like it. Mana Drain, the best counterspell, the best double blue counterspell in the game. So double blue instant speed, counter target spell at the beginning of your next main phase, add an amount of colorless equal to that spell's mana value. Our commander cost 8. So mana draining something for 4 or 5, and it makes your commander only cost 3. Pretty good, especially if there's commander tax. This pays for a lot of that colorless. Sounds great. Negate. Pretty simple counterspell. 1 colorless, 1 blue. Instant. Counter target non-creature spell. Just some protection for if they've got kill spells. I didn't mean to click that. I can't stop it now. Yeah, just get rid of the counter spells and or removal spells that they're trying to use on your stuff. Rakdos Charm, 1 black, 1 red, instant speed, choose 1. Exile target player's graveyard. I believe that everybody in the game, unless you're really trying to do some really niche strategies, I think everybody should have at least 1 to 2 graveyard hate. You need some kind of graveyard hate. Exile graveyard, Bajuku Bog, Rakdos Charm, whatever. Those artifacts, there's a bunch of artifacts that do it. Yeah, at least run 1, just so you have an option, you know? Otherwise, decks like this will just run away and stomp you with it. The amount of value these decks get are too good, but if you get rid of their graveyard, they don't do a lot. They're forced to play fair. The second effect is Destroy Target Artifact. That's pretty good. There are a lot of bad artifacts out there. Destroying artifacts is good. And then also, each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. This is not that important, but if there's a token deck that's running a bunch of tokens, and maybe they make 20, 30 creatures, you cast this and they die. So yeah, very flexible. You've got Saw in Half. This is one of the meme cards from Unfinity. I say meme because when I first read it, I thought it was a joke, and obviously it's from Unfinity, so I was like, oh, okay, it is a joke. But then I found out that it was legal in Commander, and I was like, oh, this card's busted. So for 2 colorless, 1 black, at instant speed, destroy target creature. That seems interesting. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copies of that creature, except their base power is half the creature's power, and their toughness is half that of the creature's toughness. Round up each time. So any enter the battlefield triggers that you would like to get, you can destroy your creature and get 2 of them. And the great thing about this is you're destroying your creature, that's going to the graveyard, and then you can reanimate it again. So you'll have 3 copies. Who doesn't want 3 Archons of Cruelties, you know? Yeah, it's pretty stupid. You can even, I mean, hell, you could even destroy your Spark Double and have it get 2 Spark Doubles, and then they both enter the battlefield as whatever you want, and then you can get your Spark Double back and have it enter the battlefield as whatever you want. I just saw in half is just so flexible and cool. I like it. You've got Unexpected Windfall, like I talked about earlier. This is the same as the big score. You've got, you find the villain's lair. This one's a little wonky, but I think that it's flexible enough to make up for the cost. I'm very cost sensitive. I've played a lot of like high speed, like quick magic, EDH level stuff. So like spells like this normally wouldn't make the cut in my kind of decks. I'm not saying that this is EDH. I'm just saying that I start to look at that kind of value that those cards get, and you're like, okay, well this isn't good enough. But for 1 colorless and 2 blue at instant speed, choose 1. You either counter target spell, or you draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. Because it's flexible, counter spell and a draw ditch. It fits the bill, so it goes in. You've got Arcane Cynic. This is your Mana Rocks. Charcoal Diamond, Mana Rock. Collector's Vault. This is sort of a Mana Rock, but it requires a little bit of juice into it. But it does everything the deck wants. So for 2 colorless, and then you can pay 2 colorless and tap it. You draw a card, then discard a card. Then you create a treasure token. You can do it at any time, which is great. So create a treasure token, draw ditch, which is great. One of the cool things that I like about this deck is you can draw and ditch a really good creature. You create the treasure token, and then you can use that treasure token to pay for reanimate, and then reanimate whatever you just ditched. Just gaining an extra mana back from a draw ditch is pretty cool. You have to pay into it a little bit, but the draw ditch part is what's more important. So it's a very cool, useful tool. Mana Rock there, Mana Rock there. Lightning Greaves is protection for your commander or any of your big, baller creatures, and also gives haste. So for 2 colorless, and it has no equip cost, which is great. You got Rakdos Signet, which is another Mana Rock. Relic of Sauron, another Mana Rock, and another interesting card. This is kind of one of the I have to test it to see how good it really is. We'll see, though. 4 colorless is a bit expensive. 4 colorless artifact, and when you tap it, you can add 2 mana of any combination of red, black, or blue. And then it also has, you can pay 3 mana, tap it, draw 2 cards to discard a card. So you're gaining an additional card because you're drawing 2, ditching 1. But it's doing what the deck wants. You want to be able to loot. It's also ramping. So I think it's probably good. You get 2 mana from putting 4 mana into it, so you get at least half the mana you put into it. So I think it's still worth it. And it's mana of any color, which is great. So mana fixing is pretty good. You got Soul Ring, one of the best ramp spells in the game. Talisman of Creativity, another Mana Rock, another Mana Rock here, another Mana Rock here. You've got the One Ring, one of the best artifacts that they've ever put in the game. It's pretty well up there. It's definitely top 5. And it's probably going to get banned in Commander if I had to take a guess. It's actually, the reason why, it's not that it's necessarily too strong, it's that it's every deck, almost every deck should run it. I would say like 99% of the decks in the world should run this card. 4 colorless, indestructible legendary artifact. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. That's pretty good. It's not insane, but it's pretty good. For 4 colorless mana, it's pretty good value. It's like a Teferi's protection, but not quite. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each bird encounter on the One Ring. Okay. And then you can tap it, put a bird encounter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each bird encounter on the One Ring. Yeah, you start to draw a ton of cards, and because you start with 40 life, the few life that you lose from this isn't that big of a deal. The amount of cards you gain, the amount of card value you gain is just insane with this card. I've watched so many games where this runs away with whoever has this, and everybody has this, it gets really wonky. Yeah, it's very good. Alright, Whip of Erebos. This is one of the questionable cards in the deck, because it does something kind of counterintuitive, but it might still be worth it. But definitely this is one of the cards that you may want to remove, because it does something bad. For 2 colorless and 2 black, legendary enchantment artifact, creature you control have lifelink. That's fantastic. You can pay 2 colorless and 2 black, and you can tap it. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. If it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Activate only as a sorcery. So this makes it so that anything you use with Whip of Erebos will never be able to come back, so you can't reanimate it again. So yeah, definitely very risky. Honestly, Mimic Vet's probably a better card than this. Matter of fact, I actually might just go Mimic Vet instead. Where's it at? We're removing it. We're doing it on the fly. I think Mimic Vet's a better card for this situation. And it's only 30 cents. So let's do this. Boom, Mimic Vet. You've heard the Whip of Erebos argument. So Mimic Vet, 3 colorless, imprint. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile a card. Exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vet to its owner's graveyard. Great thing about this is that, you know, it's going to come back. You know, your stuff that you Mimic Vet's going to come back. And it can Mimic Vet any non-token creature, which is great. You can pay 3 colorless and tap it, create a token that's a copy of a card exiled with Mimic Vet. It gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next unstep. So it creates tokens of it. There's really weird situations to where you can exile. You can go to imprint it with your commander, for instance, and you wouldn't want to do it in this situation, but there's a situation, I don't exactly remember how it works, but basically if you go to imprint it and they like remove the Mimic Vat, then your commander is like just gone forever. It just remains in exile, basically. So I don't know. One of the rulings will probably tell you that. All right. Recto Segment. Okay, what is it going to make me go through the thingies again? Okay, all right. Animate Dead. So for 1 colorless and 1 black, enchant Aura, enchant creature card in a graveyard. When Animate Dead enters the battlefield, if it's on the battlefield, it loses it. Okay, you know what? This is very simple how this works. When Animate Dead enters the battlefield, you choose a creature in your graveyard. Animate Dead will enchant that creature and then bring that creature onto the battlefield, and then they will both remain on the battlefield. And if Animate Dead leaves the battlefield, the creature dies. You have to sacrifice it. The creature also gets -1, -0 until end of turn. You've got Necromancy, another one of these weird cards where there's like a lot of wording. If you cast it at sorcery speed, anytime you can cast it at sorcery speed, it's just a standard reanimate. It targets something, it reanimates it, it attaches to it, and then if Necromancy leaves, the creature has to sacrifice it, same as before, same as the other card. But you can cast it at instant speed, and then you only get it until the next cleanup step. Pretty simple. It's 2 colors, 1 black. You can do some really crazy things with being able to do it at instant speed, get a blocker or whatever. So it's sometimes worth casting it at instant speed, but most of the time you want to cast it at sorcery speed. You've got Rhystic Study, 2 colors, 1 blue, enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player plays 1. Rhystic Study is just one of those kind of staples in any deck that's playing blue that you want a ton of value. Paying the 1 is just some people won't ever do it, and you'll just get tons of card draw. It just stays out there. It's a little annoying, but like the value is just so good. It's just you kind of have to run it, you know. All right, Sneak Attack, one of the goats of the deck for sure. 3 colorless, 1 red, enchantment. You can pay 1 singular red. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Seems good. That creature gains haste. Seems great. Sacrifice a creature at the beginning of the next end step. Fantastic. This is basically like discarding a creature, but then you get to attack with it, and you get all the enter the battlefield triggers and all the attack triggers. It's fantastic. Sneak Attack is the goat of this deck for sure, because you're going to reanimate them when it hits the graveyard afterwards, but you're going to get all that benefit before that. Fantastic. And then next is lands. Nothing crazy in the land section. Just dual land there, fetch land. Bajuka Bog, like I said, you want at least 1 to 2 different ways of getting rid of graveyards. So having this is great. It comes with a battlefield tapped, which I don't like. I'm very hesitant on this card, but sometimes it's worth it, you know? Clearwater Pathway, another dual land. Tri-land, dual land. Desolate Lighthouse, this is one of the utility lands, so for a colorless, you can just tap it for colorless, or you can pay a colorless, a blue, and a red. Tap it, draw a card, and then discard a card. There's a couple that are like cheaper and with generic mana, like I think it's called Gyre Reach Sanitarium, but everybody draws ditches. I don't really like giving the ability for everybody to draw a ditch. So this is just you draw a ditch, but you do have to pay a little extra mana, and it has to be colored mana. So you're paying 4 mana, including the Desolate Lighthouse, but I think it's still worth it if you got nothing else better to do with your mana. Dual land here, dual land there. It could be tri-land, could be whatever. There's some islands in the deck. There's a total. The deck list will be down below, but there's a total of 2 islands. Another dual land here, dual land there. A total of 2 mountains and a total of 6 swamps. There's a fetch land. That's like a tri-land basically. Dual land there, fetch land there, and another dual land there. And another dual land there. I like these dual lands for the budget decks. Only 76 cents, and it taps for colorless a lot of the times. And if you need the mana, it just pings you a little bit. That's okay. Steam Vent's another dual land there, dual land there, dual land there. Like I said, 6 swamps. Then you've got Takanuma, Abandoned Mire, legendary land. It's just a better swamp. It taps for black, and also has a channel ability. For 3 colors and 1 black, you discard it. You mill 3 cards, and then you return a creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. It doesn't have to be from the 3 you milled, which is fantastic. It costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. Most of the time you want them in your graveyard. You want to mill them and keep them in your graveyard. You can choose to get any creature. It doesn't have to be the one that you want to reanimate, but if you can always choose to get, like I said, any creature, so it's pretty great. It's just very flexible land, and the fact that it's just a swamp normally, it's great. Another dual land there, dual land there, dual land there, and a tri-land there. I basically almost always, I've never cycled this in my entire lifetime. I've always fetch land for it, so it's almost always on the field. You run out of fetch lands, you're always going to get your tri-lands first. On turn 1, you fetch land, you get the tri-land. That's just how I play, you know? But this does have the ability if you get land flooded, and you can cycle it away. Otherwise, you fetch it on turn 1, and it goes to the battlefield tapped. It's great. And that is Sauron, Lord of the Rings, Reanimator style. I think it's a really fun deck. I think it's going to be fantastic. I can give an update on if there's anything I changed over the course. I'll like update the deck list. I'll make this deck list. It'll be down in the description below. And then I'll make an updated deck list at the end of the month when I've played the deck more and seen if there's anything else I need to add. If I've missed anything, put it down in the description below. Let me know if there's any cool, awesome creatures that I missed that are like good reanimation targets or even good value for the deck as well. And thanks for watching, everybody, and have a good one.